Here are some highlights from a recent Performance Playbook workshop that we hosted on the topic of profitability, inventory optimization, and pricing optimization. To view the full video of the full workshop, click the link in the description.
Let's talk about optimizing inventory. When we think about optimizing inventory, we think about maximizing growth. Top-line sales growth is really around understanding how you can leverage your inventory position and have the right product at the right time in the right place. Most companies will take their inventory and rank it A, B, C, or D. Some will have it as A and B, some will have it as A, B, and C. Illustratively, we've shown you here A, B, C, and D. Now, best practice in the industry is that your A SKUs, your top SKUs, might represent 50% of your inventory position at any one given time. Number two is your B SKUs might represent around 30% of that inventory, right? So about 80% of that inventory is in your A and B. Remaining best practice, your C would be about 15% and your D maybe 5%. Now you're always going to have some level of each within your organization. It's never going to be 0 C's or 0 D's. But the question is how you manage that. What we find with our clients today, what we find in the industry, is what actually happens is that your A's are really below, maybe 94, 95% of where they should be to meet the demand and serve your customers the best you can. The B customers, or the B SKUs, those really around 73 to 75% of the inventory level it should be, and your D's and your C's are making up a disproportionate amount of the inventory what it should be. So think of your B's as falling in no man's land because your C's and D's are kind of taking up more inventory space in your organization, and what gets squeezed is your B SKUs. Now your A's will drop a little bit, the B's will take most of that hit in your organization. So if we look to the right and we think about different types of insights and actions and impact to your organization that you can take, we kind of divide it into 3 different areas. The first is that you're probably most likely over allocated in your C's and D's. And that over allocation in your company will not allow you to do some things in your A's and B's that you would want to do to better serve your customers. The action that you can take is you can partner with your manufacturer supplier, you can partner with them in understanding what you can do to move those C's and D's out of your inventory. In some cases, you might be able to return that inventory back to your supplier, but jointly working with them together to serve that end customer and understand what products they need, or move it to a different channel where the value of that C and D SKU might be higher. Okay? The impact of that should directly affect the profitability of your business. If you can reduce those C's and D's within your organization, you should see between a 10 and 30% increase in your business profitability and your inventory turns as a result of that. The second one I wanted to talk about is the underallocated B's. Now again, those B's are taking the squeeze of the C's and D gain in your inventory. So as you think about reallocating your inventory, if you can reallocate a greater proportion to the A's and B's, you'll be in a better position to serve same day, next day service to those end customers. So because those B's are under allocated, you don't really have the right level of inventory at the right time in the right place. And it's probably obvious that if you don't have what the customer needs, you can't get it to them in a timely manner and you can't sell what you don't have. It might be obvious, but you'd be surprised how difficult that can be for some cases. And lastly, the C SKUs or the C inventory. The challenge you have with the C inventory is they haven't risen up to the ability to become a B, and they run the risk of becoming a D quickly. And you need to manage those C's so that you do not become a D, and you can actively work with your supplier and determine the best strategy to move those C's to a B, or move them out of your inventory with your supplier and have a better strategy to serve your end customers. At the bottom, what we talked about is that those C's and D's have a big impact to your business. And lastly, freeing up $1 in that slow-moving inventory can translate to a 2 to 3 times return in your A's and B inventory. And what that simply means is that as you move the focus from your C's and D's, even if it's small to even smaller, you'll get a greater focus on the A's and B's. What you'll see in the next graphic is the A and B SKUs. If they're in stock and they're readily available to your customers, they'll be in a better position to serve them. What you want to avoid is over inventory of your C's and D's, which you may not serve next day or same day. You want to focus on those A's and B's, which are a lion's share of your opportunity with your end customers and your revenue, and make sure that they're in a position to serve your customers either same day or next day. And a very few of those A's and B's, very little, might be 3 days or longer.
Jay, I love that point, especially when it comes to same day and next day inventory. I mean, as a distributor and as a manufacturer, you want maximum first time fill rates for the channel. Those distributors and manufacturers that win the fill rate battle win the customer. So if you can get a 95% first time fill rate by having the proper A's and B's, you're going to take share from your competition. Because when they go to the competition down the street, they may be out of a high moving item. And that is going to leave a very bad impression. So if you can build your depth of your A's and B's to improve your first time fill rate, it's the number one way to grow as a distributor. It's the number one way to grow as a manufacturer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Those A's and B's are critically important in today's market. It's fast paced out there, and customers do not have the patience to wait necessarily for you to get those A's and B's in stock because they need them today. They're expecting them to be in inventory, and if they're not, they're going to have to go somewhere else to go get it.
Yeah, I think, guys, what I'm taking away from this is this is an excellent way for manufacturers to hit on their primary goal, which is unit volume growth. So if manufacturers can partner with their distributors in deeper ways like this to where they're helping distributors rebalance their inventory and segment their inventory based on high moving versus slow moving, this frees up working capital for these distributors to drive more of the A's and B's, right? Same day, next day. And this is where manufacturers can bring in their own data, sets of data to say, hey, this is an A SKU for me as a manufacturer in this specific region. It might be a C or a D for you, Mr. Distributor, but if we drive more optimization around your inventory, freeing up working capital, we can push more of these SKUs into your local market here. And even helping distributors with pulling back some slow-moving inventory. Return goods authorizations could be a bigger play here moving forward, but there may be an upside advantages to manufacturers, bringing in additional SKUs into their distributor relationships. So, ideal time to work with your distributors in a very close fashion, using data on both sides of the conversation here to really figure out new ways to drive unit volume growth.
Yeah, James, I would just add one thing that I think a lot of manufacturers don't think about. You have to choose your distribution partners carefully, and you have to factor inventory into it. So I'll give you, for example, let's say you're 3M, and you've got 2 distributors who aren't properly stocking your product, and you have a contractor that goes into the first distributor, and they say, I don't have it.
Yeah.
And then they go to the second distributor that doesn't have the inventory, and they say, I don't have it. So what is that customer thinking? They've just been to 2 distributors, and they haven't been able to find your product. They're not blaming the distributor, they're blaming you. They're wondering what's up with 3M when I can't find their product at 2 distributors. They may go to an alternate source, an alternate product. It may take you a long time to change that perception with a very important customer.
Yeah, and I think, John, you bring up a good point here that the alignment between the supplier and the distributor about what is an A SKU, what is the expectation of the market with these types of products. And I think that alignment is sometimes missing, that I call it an A, supplier calls it a B, or even if they still call it A, they don't treat it necessarily the same all the time. And it's critically important that an A to you is an A to my supplier, which is also an A to my customer. It's everyone's A, right? A B is everyone's B. Now, different customers may have, that's a critical, high value product for them, which is your B, but it's still important to them. But you don't want the customer saying this is an A and you and the supplier treating it like a D. Or the customer is saying, this is really a D product, and you're saying, we're going to treat it like an A because we're going to convince you to buy more of it. And the customer's not asking for it. That alignment's really important in understanding how you rank those SKUs to make sure they are aligned with you and the supplier and the distributor, as well as the end market needs and demand.
Yeah, Jay, you and I were just talking the other day how this is so important for that relationship. I mean, we're talking about stock outs or inadequate stock. How many times has a distributor told their end customer, I am a premier 3M partner, right?
Sure.
They're out there, but their behavior doesn't support that.
Correct.
So they go out, that customer comes in and says, oh, they're premier 3M. They come in, they have a bad experience. That bad experience gets transferred back to your brand. So you have to pick your partners closely, and you've got to work together to make sure if they are a premier partner, you're properly supporting each other as premier partners.
Absolutely. Really, really important. Now we want to dive into supplier scorecard. Now, yes, supplier scorecards are nothing revolutionary. Most of you have them in some form or some capacity. What we would contend here in best practice is go beyond your top performing SKUs from a sales, revenue, or profit perspective. Look beyond just saying, hey, what is my top selling SKUs? What is my bottom selling SKUs? And reporting that back. What you can see here is there's opportunity to really institute best practice in the market to put your supplier in a position to better serve you and your customers together. And so what you'll see here is that you have things like average SKU transaction size, lines per order, number of lines, negotiated CSP sales performance, to name a few. All of these will help you understand the why behind a SKU's position, whether it's an A, B, C, or D. Understanding that a SKU is an A simply because it sells the most doesn't necessarily give you enough information to know how to properly address or forecast those SKUs for future demand or customer needs. And then we move to the supplier benefits of this. So we think about this in a couple contexts. One is that the supplier should be in a position to gain incremental market share. Most important, this information is going to help them better position their product with the distributor, with their channel partners, as well as better serve the end customers. In addition to that, the supplier should be in a better position to grow their lines within these distributors, which is really important. Now, not all distributors carry everything of what you sell. But if you have the right product focused in your right market, you should be in a better position to grow those lines within those channels. And then third, the joint planning calls or the joint work out in the field. That's going to bring back a significant insight back to the organization. But those calls and those engagements with those end customers is going to put the supplier in a better position to make sure they have the right inventory to put out in the market to better serve their distributors. Meaning that if the demand is for those A's and B's, they're in a position through that customer-backed research and customer-backed data to ensure they have A SKUs and B SKUs in the market at the right time within the right region. James, thoughts about how manufacturers can leverage these scorecards really to start, changing their business to better serve those end customers?
Yeah, Jay, and it's a fascinating topic because it's not new. A lot of manufacturers are used to working with distributors who are tracking a lot of different data points on performance and whatnot. I think what you pointed out here is that it's not enough just to track it. You got to move into this joint planning aspect to where both the distributor and the supplier are starting to share more of these data points in a lot of these joint planning discussions. And this is what we've been seeing a large trend behind, is this data is very powerful for both manufacturers and the distributors to create better, more strategic programs to drive more volume. And from a manufacturer standpoint, the deeper they get into this planning, the stronger they become against stealing share away from their competitors. So if manufacturers are anxious to get this and they're driving the distributors to create better programs, that share is being converted into those strategic suppliers.
Yeah, Jay, I just think you covered a lot, especially on what I call the inventory segmentation and the scorecard. I think a lot of times it's really simple. and distributors and manufacturers don't think as simple as they need to be. So why do you want maximum first-time fill rates? It's the number one thing a customer rates you on. So first-time fill rates. And if you think about what your sales team spend a lot of non-selling time on, back orders, stuff they're trying to chase down.
Yeah.
They're spending all their time trying to fix a problem they wouldn't have if they had better first-time fill rates. Right? Customer comes in, you can fill their whole order. You don't have to chase down a back order. So I think sometimes it's that simple. How are you building a system and a distribution network to make sure you have maximum first-time fill rates? Those distributors that do that take share and they never give it back.
Yep.
Yeah, and John, from what you've been seeing with distributors, how much of this data do they actually open up to their key suppliers?
Yeah, you're seeing more of it. Distributors and manufacturers are getting better at bringing in the customer data, the inventory data, the sales data, hey, they went to the website and searched for this. They're getting better at bringing in multi-level data. So there's improvement, but there's still a lot of focus on things that don't drive sales. Chasing down back orders because we don't have our inventory position right. Chasing down products we don't have priced right. Think about how much time you spend there that doesn't net you a single additional dollar as a manufacturer and distributor. That's one of the reasons you want to have a core SKU list. And a core SKU list is SKUs that I've got to have that drive maximum growth for me. So, that core SKU list is the best of your A's and B's for your top customers. Think about it, it is your bread, your milk, your cheese in the store. What can you not be out of? If you can maximize your first-time fill rates on your core SKUs, that is the way to grow as a distributor and a manufacturer.
Great job, Jay, on wrapping up the supplier scorecard. So the next part of the inventory optimization segment here is to talk about segmentation with core, non-core, and regional SKUs. And John Gunderson will walk us through that.
Let's talk inventory segmentation beyond the A, B, C, D level. This is a model that we use at Dorn with our partners, really building a core SKU list. So if you look here, a core SKU list is really made up of SKUs from your strategic and your preferred suppliers. The suppliers that are most important to you. It influences, but it doesn't dictate stocking behavior. But you really want to drive your customer SKU selection to the highest profitable SKUs you can. If you have a good core SKU list, you can grow top line sales and margin at the same time. And then you want to drive inventory efficiencies. Jay talked about it a lot today. Getting more A's and B's, increasing your turns, increasing how often you move through your inventory is key. So you really want to build a list of core SKUs. Now you may be a distributor that doesn't have the same manufacturer partners in Omaha that you do in Florida. So you may have different SKUs that you've got to support. In those cases, you got to have it regionalized by supplier, by product category. And you've got to spend your time, your team's time has to be spent at the core SKU and regional core SKU level. That is the breakthrough. What you will often find is your teams, manufacturers and distributors, is spent on your non-core SKUs. Stuff that's not moving, I'm wasting a lot of time trying to get this sent back. That's why if you partner with your suppliers as a distributor and you partner with your distributors as a manufacturer, that's the top way to grow, but concentrate 90% of your effort on your core SKUs. James, what do you think?
Yeah, John, what really strikes me on this topic is the regionality of a lot of our clients' businesses, because every region, at least in North America, it's going to have a different install base of end customers. So, you might be heavy manufacturing, a heavy vertical of manufacturing in certain regional markets. And nowadays, when you consider, especially a lot of the digital selling, you're getting a national reach potentially through your digital selling tools, but you still may have a very regional audience. So, what trends are we seeing more on the regionality side of this, John? Because there is a really different mix of products and demand within each one of these markets, we'll say.
Yeah, James, I don't know if that challenge is ever going to go away, because in some markets you've got an alliance with a manufacturer, and in another market they may not want you on that level.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to go away, but I think what has happened is you can process and manage much more data, that you can build better models to get at the data quicker, to get down a level. In the past, you had to let a lot happen locally, regionally. Now you can consolidate that a lot more and use data for those areas where you can't consolidate your lines across the nation.
I think that's a great point. John, the data aspect of this cannot be underestimated, in the sense that historically, suppliers and distributors have been reactive in this, right? The data allows them to be proactive in understanding where they should be placing the inventory, what regions are going to react or respond to different inventory positions, and also do a better job in forecasting that inventory, or forecasting where it should be, when it should be, for that regionality. The reactive aspect of it is really a model of 20 years ago. We keep running out of product in a certain region. We're low in, region XYZ. Now, with the data and the use of the analytics that companies are deploying, they should be able to say, hey, based on where this demand curve is going, we'll need to ramp up inventory in this region, most likely in 6 to 8 months. We are going to be underserving our current levels. We'll underserve the market at that time. That's a big piece of that data and how it's evolving today in the marketplace.
That's great. So John, from a manufacturer standpoint, a lot of the manufacturers might have a national focus, but or have a sales structure that's very regionalized. For helping some of those sales leaders on the manufacturing side approach distributor customers with ideas on how to drive more velocity in their local market around certain SKUs, what would best equip them to have that conversation with key distributors on a regional basis?
Yeah, I think, James, a lot of manufacturers miss an important point. They don't come in with their A, B, C, D SKU ranking and talk to their distributors. So here's my experience as a distributor. If a manufacturer has a 20 share in Chicago and they want a 30 share, what's their go-to button? They usually don't go back to their existing distribution group, because they're not talking to them with enough data. What do? They add distribution, right? So you end up with manufacturers are adding to distribution to get to the 30%. Well, the more you add to get to 30%, then you've got 12 people pricing your product instead of maybe 8 before. What does that mean when 12 people are pricing to 10 customers? They're putting price pressure on you, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting to 30%, but they're driving the market levels down. And I think that's just a big miss. And then what happens when they get to 35 and the margin's down? What's the go-to button for a manufacturer? They prune distribution. They go back in and they take off the 8 people again. So to not play the yo-yo game, you really got to look at your distributors you have and identify the ones that can actually help you grow in core SKUs that improve your first-time fill rates, and invest in those distributors. Then when you get to 30% share, you're actually at the best margin you could imagine.
So the flip side of this, John, is a distributor who's trying to expand their regional reach, and they may not have the strategic relationships with certain suppliers in some key markets where there's a huge upside opportunity. What are we advising those distributors to do to get some of the best programs, the best terms, and the best support from some of those regional, high-moving manufacturers?
Yeah, you come in with data, you come in with how their SKUs rank for you. Mm-hmm. You come in with a core SKU list and say, here's the core SKUs that I've got designated for you. Here's 2 or 3 others that maybe we could make core if we could come up with a good program. And you come in with data from a distributor perspective. The manufacturer's not going to be used to that type of conversation. And they're going to go back to their headquarters and say, hey, you know what? John Distribution actually came with me a plan, and maybe we ought to invest with John because he's really focused on growing and helping me grow while I maintain my margins. That is a way to do it as a distributor, and it's also a win-win for a manufacturer. And I think some of the big national distributors do that well, but some of the regionals and some of the locals have some catch up to do. But I would say no matter what market you're in, if you can get more organized, there are distributors you can go out and take share from. The same thing on a manufacturer side.